17 years. That's how long the Roman Inquisition watched Giordano Bruno, followed him, built a case against him, and when they finally had him, they didn't rush. They took 7 years just to break him down before the execution. Most people think he died for science, for saying the earth moved, but that's not even close to the real reason they wanted him dead. Bruno knew something. He believed something so threatening to the church's power that burning him alive wasn't enough. They had to silence every word he ever spoke. What exactly did this man say that made an entire empire want him erased? Born in 1548 in Nola, a small town just outside Naples, Giordano Bruno grew up in a world where asking the wrong question could end your life. He entered the Dominican order at 17, became a monk, studied theology. But Bruno wasn't built for obedience. His mind didn't stop at the edges of what the church allowed. He read forbidden books. He questioned doctrines that weren't supposed to be questioned, and he didn't hide it well. By his early 30s, he had already fled Italy, then fled again from France, then England, then Germany. City after city, Bruno would arrive, share his ideas, make powerful enemies, and disappear before things got too dangerous. He wasn't just talking about astronomy. He was proposing that the universe had no center, no single point where God placed humanity above everything else. He believed in infinite worlds, infinite stars, infinite possibilities. In 1584, he wrote it all down in a book called On the Infinite Universe and Worlds. To a scientist today, that sounds reasonable. To the Catholic Church in the 16th century, it was an attack on the entire foundation of their power, because if Earth wasn't the center of creation, if humans were just one species on one planet among countless others, then what made the Church's authority absolute? What made Rome special? What made any of it sacred? Bruno didn't just challenge astronomy, he challenged the story that kept millions of people obedient, and that's what made him dangerous. In 1591, Bruno made the worst decision of his life. He went back to Italy. A Venetian nobleman named Giovanni Mocenigo invited him, promised him safety, said he wanted to learn Bruno's memory techniques, his philosophy, his methods. Bruno trusted him. That trust lasted less than a year. Mocenigo felt cheated. He wanted secrets Bruno wouldn't share. So in May 1592, he wrote a letter to the Venetian Inquisition. He didn't just report Bruno, he listed everything, every conversation, every idea Bruno had shared in private, every belief that crossed a line. Bruno was arrested within days. The Venetian Inquisition interrogated him for months. Bruno, remarkably, defended himself. He drew careful lines between philosophy and theology. He argued his ideas were speculative, not heretical. And for a moment it almost worked. Then Rome got involved. The Roman Inquisition demanded his transfer. Venice resisted at first. They had their own authority, their own pride. But Rome pushed harder, and in February 1593, Bruno was handed over. He entered a papal prison, and the real nightmare began. For 6 years, he sat in that cell, interrogated repeatedly, presented with charges he had to answer for, given chances to recant, to say it was all a mistake, to beg forgiveness, to surrender everything he believed. He refused, every single time. The men across the table from him weren't just trying to punish him. They were trying to understand how a man could know what was coming and still not break. They never got their answer. 6 years in that cell changed everything around Bruno, but not Bruno himself. The Inquisition built its case piece by piece. 8 heretical propositions. That was the formal charge. 8 specific beliefs, they said, crossed the line beyond philosophy into a direct attack on church doctrine. Things like, the soul doesn't die with the body, that magic and the natural world are connected, that Christ wasn't divine in the way the church demanded you believe, the universe has no beginning and no end. Each charge was an invitation to recant. Each time Bruno engaged, being argued and negotiated, but never fully surrendered, and that drove them mad. They weren't dealing with a screaming radical. They were dealing with a calm, precise thinker who understood their arguments better than most of them did. He wasn't defiant out of stubbornness. He was defiant because he genuinely believed he was right. In 1599, 2 senior inquisitors were assigned to deliver an ultimatum: recant everything. No conditions, no philosophical loopholes. Bruno asked for more time. They gave him 40 days. He used all 40, then asked for more. They refused. On January 20th, 1600, the verdict came: guilty, heretic, unrepentant. The sentence was death, and negotiated, but never fully surrendered. And that drove them mad. They weren't dealing with a screaming radical. They were dealing with a calm, precise thinker who understood their arguments better than most of them did. Then Bruno looked at the panel of judges and said something that echoed through centuries: that perhaps they pronounced this sentence against him with greater fear than he received it. He wasn't performing courage. He meant every word. On February 17th, 1600, they burned Giordano Bruno alive in the Campo de' Fiori in Rome. They tied his tongue so he couldn't speak, because even at the end they were afraid of his words. He didn't recant, not once in 7 years, not when they threatened him, not when they sentenced him, not when the fire started. For over 2 centuries the Church kept its trial records locked away. It wasn't until the 19th century that the full picture started emerging. And in 2000, exactly 400 years after his execution, the Vatican expressed regret. Not an apology. Regret. Bruno never got a pardon. Here's what stays with me about this story. Bruno wasn't a saint. He wasn't always easy to get along with. He made bad decisions. He trusted the wrong people. But he had one thing that the most powerful institution in the world couldn't take from him. He knew what he believed, and he refused to call it a lie just to survive. Most of us will never face anything close to what he faced, but we all know what it feels like to stay quiet about something true because speaking up costs too much. Bruno paid the highest price for refusing to do that. The question isn't whether he was right about the universe. Science eventually proved he was closer to the truth than the men who burned him. The real question is, what would you be willing to burn for? Because history doesn't remember the people who stayed safe. It remembers the ones who didn't.